What's going on, folks? Eddie Carrington, Mayor of Flux City. Today we are going to be reacting to a video from CNBC that highlights John Rose. And this is an OG in the affordable housing game. And he has a lot of experience on the LIHTC side, which in 2025 is probably one of the few mechanisms to make affordable housing pencil out due to the challenging climate that we have with regard to building more affordable housing throughout the country. And so he's also going to be discussing sustainable development, like green building and things of that nature. So we're going to listen to it. I'm going to react to it, and you're going to provide feedback in the comments. Let's get right to it.
Whether it's in the for sale or rental market, the affordable housing crisis is only getting worse.
They say we're short closer to 10 million doors when it comes to affordable housing in this country as of now. And so something drastic has to change when it comes to being able to create the type of housing that is very much needed across the country. And unfortunately, single family homes just won't cut it. It just won't be the solution that was once the solution back in the 40s and 50s. And this country is kind of going through an evolution of such when it comes to housing and consumer behavior with regard to our demands and our needs for housing. We'll have to adjust accordingly in order for us to have the type of supply that we need for the next generation.
Apartment developers in particular say it's just too expensive to put up quality, low-income housing. But developers just got a big boost from the recently passed tax and spending bill. I caught up with Jonathan Rose of his namesake company, who's been in this business for more than 2 decades.
This is a tough time, I think, for all of real estate is being challenged by higher interest rates and by higher construction costs. And by the way, building department requirements and all the frictions that are making real estate difficult. But
What's really insane is you thought the time of COVID was challenging when it comes to the construction costs at that time, just ballooning across the board. You know, lumber was going up, aluminum, glass, roofing supplies, you name it, everything, concrete, everything was really through the roof during the time of COVID for a number of reasons. But we were all, as developers, hoping that the prices would come down a bit. But in actuality, it costs more per square foot to build now than it did right around COVID, which is really, really insane to even say and consider and to kind of come to that conclusion. But it's really, really tough from a cost perspective to build something, especially here in the city of Detroit, but I'm going to assume that that's across the globe.
There's also a lot of support, and our job is to weave the pathway in between the complexities, the challenges, and the opportunities.
And you just got a big boost, of course, from the recently passed tax and spending bill. Explain all of that.
The dramatic expansion of the low-income housing tax credit, this is the main tool that we use to build new affordable housing and that we use to renovate and improve deeply needed existing affordable housing.
So LIHTC is a bit complex, and it actually is managed and administered through the IRS. So kind of a high-level summary of how LIHTC works. They are tax credits for developers. So developers receive tax credits that can actually be used to offset their federal tax liability. And in return, this is where we agree as developers to rent a certain percentage of the units that we're developing to tenant to earn below a certain percentage of the area's median income. And then there's a partnership in a sense between an investor and a developer, where companies that are looking to actually lower their tax burden can invest in these different projects and receive tax credits from the developer. The challenge from the developer side is there is a bit of a rubrics. This project has to score at a certain point in order for it to be acceptable for whether it be 4% or 9% light tech. And there's certain compliance requirements from a developer standpoint and long-term commitments that we have to basically agree to and abide by. But at the end of the day, this is really a pretty complex method of gaining funding for affordable housing. However, it's really, once again, only or one of the few options that are making these types of affordable projects pencil.
There's been bipartisan support, by the way, for this increase in the low-income housing tax credit for about a decade, but there's never been the political vehicle to attach it to. And finally, we got it. And it's a big boost for the creation of more affordable housing. In fact, the United States has a shortage of about 10 million units. This won't solve the whole 10 million
10
unit
million.
problem, but it'll be a big help.
But when we look at affordable housing, though, I've seen some of your buildings. They actually look very luxurious. I know there is this play to have some units affordable and some more luxury, and then there's kind of the NIMBYism of neighborhoods where they don't want to see these affordable units, so then you put the units in other places that you kind of pencil in some kind of math. I know developers do that. How exactly, with your companies and your buildings, do you really make it affordable? I mean, for lower income people to actually live in these buildings, which to me looks super swanky.
Right. So first of all, let's talk.
She's making a point that the units that are deemed affordable actually are high quality, top shelf finishes and materials. And this is something that is usually demanded by the local entities that are approving these types of projects within their communities. So city council, for an example, here in the city of Detroit, if you're bringing a project in front of the city council and you need to get zoning approvals or tax abatements or anything of that nature, variances, they're going to say, hey, look, you're going to need to make the affordable units the same quality as what you're making for the market rate units if they are going to incorporate market rate in this overall development. Otherwise, the city council will not approve the potential zoning ask or tax abatement that you're trying to gain access to. So from a developer's standpoint, this is a requirement in order for us to make sure that we're providing high quality living space, no different between affordable and market rate. Otherwise, we're going to get caught out.
Talk about the looks. We're deeply committed to creating beautiful buildings. One of the reasons why communities oppose affordable housing is because a lot of affordable housing that was built in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s was cheap and ugly. And I wouldn't want it in my neighborhood either. So we're building really well-designed buildings, very green buildings that we think are improving the neighborhoods that they're part of. And the other thing is we're long-term owners. And so we're building buildings of substantial quality because in the long run, that's going to be to our benefit in terms of lower operating and capital costs.
So with his long-term approach to his developments, there are developers that will build affordable housing via the light tech approach, where as a developer, you typically receive a majority of your benefit via the developer fee. So the developer fee could be pretty substantial depending on how big the project actually is. But after the project is completed, a lot of times the developer, after roughly the requirement for them to, keep affordability for potentially 15 years and going through the administrative necessities for affordable housing and property management challenges, the developer would typically sell the property to make a profit at the end of that 15-year term. But his scenario is to buy and hold or to develop and hold, which is not a bad one because obviously you're hoping to be able to take advantage of appreciation of that property, which with these units being affordable, your appreciation is kind of capped in a sense. However, after their 15-year term is up, depending on, the agreement they have in place, let's assume it's 15 years to kind of keep this property affordable, they have the ability as a light tech developer to resubmit this property um, for more benefits and tax credits from the IRS, from the government, in order to do CapEx, rehab, and updates throughout the site. So let's say, year 15, 16, the roof starts to leak and they have issues with the furnaces not being as efficient as opposed to what is currently available 15 years from now. They have the ability to resubmit the project and gain more tax credits, right? So a lot of people don't necessarily talk about that detail, but that is a strategy that these light tech developers sometimes implement in their overall goal.
Is the demand from the consumer more for affordable or more for green? And does it cost more to build green or to
Great
even
question.
renovate or convert to green?
So the demand from the consumer, absolutely number one is affordability. Because when you're a lower income person, a working class person in the United States, just making the numbers of your daily life work is so marginal. And if we can reduce housing costs, and so in affordable housing, we define affordability as not costing more than 30% of somebody's income for people who are earning less than 60% of an area median income, or maybe 80% in some cases.
Give me the rent on that. In an average city in America, what would the monthly rent be?
So
Affordable.
it varies enormously by area median income, but an affordable rent might be $800 or $1,200 a month for a studio apartment, and $1,500 to $1,800, say, for a one bedroom, and maybe $2,200 for a two bedroom. Although those can vary. So, for example, in our Sendero Verde project, there's seven.
Yeah, so in the city of Detroit, those numbers are a little high in comparison to what the city of Detroit's affordability rates are, but he did a really good job kind of breaking that down for us to really digest and to kind of understand how affordability is calculated.
So those can vary. So, for example, in our Sendero Verde project, there's seven income bands. And so there may be one family that's paying $300 a month for an apartment and another family that's paying $2,800 for the same apartment. Getting back to your point, number one, what matters most is the affordability. But when we build greener, number one, we're lowering our energy costs. Number two, we're lowering their energy costs, which helps their long-term budgets. And number three, most modern building materials have a lot of toxicity in them. And particularly low-income people are living often in places that have mold and have lead and have dust and other environmental hazards. What a lot of families tell us is when they move into our projects, not understanding what the green benefits are, and all of a sudden their kids stop having asthma and their kids are attending much more school than they're able to in the past. They thank us for this incredible benefit that they didn't understand. Getting back to your question on cost,
I was waiting on him to talk about cost because that was all important, but it's also important to break down what it costs to build out a green building.
I started doing green buildings in the early 1980s and 90s when there was um, no subsidies for greening buildings. There was no interest in greening buildings. So we had to learn how to make our buildings green without spending more. Uh, to make our buildings super green, like the Sendero Verde project and like the Faircliff, these are passive house projects. Those cost about 5 to 7% more to make the buildings this super green standard. But for the acquisition rehab, the typical
Once again, the only way that could pencil out in most markets is with the help of light tech funding.
projects that we're buying in our investment funds and making green, these are buildings that need new boilers. We might as well put in an energy efficient boiler. These are buildings that where they need the toilets replaced, so we're putting in water efficient toilets. We're actually getting returns on our green investments. We aim to get a 5-year payback or better in all our green strategies in these in our acquisition fund projects. And a 5-year payback is a 20% return.
So just to clarify,
And he's potentially not mentioning rebates that may be offered by the state where you're able to, based off of what type of equipment you're putting in these units, you're literally able to get a rebate back from the state and or through the energy companies that are operating within the state. And I was able to get a rebate on a project that I did here in the city of Detroit, which was pretty substantial based off of adding particular energy efficient appliances and LED lights and particular insulation in the walls, things of that nature. The type of windows that I installed, like all of those things allotted for me to take advantage of an energy rebate, which I'm going to also assume that John bakes that into his strategy as well.
If you're an investor out there and you're interested in affordable housing and you've thought before, well, I can't make a ton of money at it, but obviously you can, what are some of the ways for investors to get in on the affordable housing play?
So, affordable housing is highly regulated, it's very complex, and it's not something for the individual investor to do on their own. But one of the ways is to invest in an existing in affordable housing investment fund. There, we're not the only ones. By the way, our fund is we're just celebrating the completion of raising $660 million. So we are not looking for new investors right now.
660 million, that's a lot of dry powder. And I'm assuming John is waiting on the right moment to jump on properties that are having issues, looking for banks to refinance out of their current mortgages, with the interest rates being as high as they are now in comparison to what they used to be 5, 6, 7 years ago. You're having a lot of properties that penciled out back in the late teens, early 20s, not being able to cover its debt service due to the fact that their loans coming due and interest rates are resetting back to what current rates are or higher. And so therefore these building owners and landlords are needing to refi and can't, because once again the interest rates are high. So now they are like, hey, look, the only other option we have is to possibly give this property back to the bank or sell it at a discount. And that's where John comes in with his $660 million. And he's cashing out properties with all of that dry powder that he has from these different investors, buying these properties that may have took 40, 50 million dollars to develop, buying them at 20, 20, $25 million. And that's where I could see John really benefiting with having that type of capital in today's market, and in turn taking that property, depending on if it's a light tech or if it scores high for light tech, submitting it for another round of light tech, giving him an opportunity to have the capex updates done via tax credits, which is a pretty good strategy, honestly.
But there are others who are. That's probably the best way to get involved.
What do you think is the better play? Developing new affordable housing or converting older housing, which we know there's a lot of, but it's, B class, C class, converted into A class affordable. Which is the better play?
Um, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. We need them all. One of the advantages about converting the existing buildings is they don't take a lot of credit or guarantees. New development takes a lot of financial muscle. The companies have to have the strength to be able to put up the guarantees to do it. Um, but we need them both. And
He's definitely right. We need them both. With that said, his strategy is probably with, once again, a lot of dry powder. He's looking for distressed properties. And he'd rather, from his strategy, I'm going to assume he'd rather come in, buy a property that is already operational, already built, just needs capex, just needs a little bit of love or a lot of bit of love. And so therefore, back to his point of the guarantees being a little less when you already have the asset that you can use as collateral. And when it comes to guarantees and things of that nature, having that asset already built and operational is always going to trump a new construction project. But once again, I would assume that his strategy, even if he doesn't necessarily mention this directly here, is to buy already existing properties.
And there's financial opportunity on both sides.
Now, as we see the for sale housing market get much more difficult, houses are not moving right now, sellers are pulling back, buyers are not getting in. We are seeing more people move toward the rental housing market, not necessarily affordable, but some luxury, some mid range. Rental housing, apartments, which we've seen just a ton of record supply come onto the market, most of it, luxury class A in the last 3 years, but a ton of supply. We thought that would help rents come down. We're starting to see rents tick back up again. How does that factor in now that you're seeing more renters stay renters and not become buyers? And then you have, again, those who need affordable housing.
Okay, so first of all, it varies dramatically market by market. So, for example, there's been overbuilding in Austin, Texas. So rents are
Mm,
beginning to tick down there, where there's been underbuilding in New York City. And so the market rate rents continue to rise. So, number one, real estate is always very, very local. Number two,
absolutely.
there's an interesting phenomenon, psychological phenomenon, which is that America's middle class was really built on home ownership. And there was a very strong aspiration for that. We're seeing that disappear. I think in part because it's so much more difficult to become a homeowner that people are giving up and renting, but also because people are actually recognizing that renting can be a better deal for them. It can actually be cheaper to rent than to own a home today, particularly with the rising cost of insurance, the high interest rates, et cetera. So, there's also growing interest in rent, but both the market pressures pushing to rentership, but also kind of an interest in being a renter.
The need to have a 2,500 square foot home, and with the size of families shrinking across the country, less and less people are having children. And once those children, eventually move out the house, you're stuck with a 2,500 square foot property. And I'm just using that as one of many examples, but the carrying cost of owning a home, you got property taxes, insurance, you got upkeep. Eventually, you got to replace the roof, furnace goes out. All of those different things do create a bit of an issue or a challenge from a home ownership perspective, where if you were to rent or lease a property, it kind of goes away, right? The need for shoveling snow and cutting your grass and things of that nature are non-existent, right? It's all baked into your lease payment. However, having that extra space does help. It does. That's a huge benefit, huge value add when it comes to, having your own place that may have a basement or garage, multiple rooms for office space or a workout space. When your family has or hits hard times and they need to come back home for a stint, and they're able to, move back into their old bedroom for a couple of months. Like, those are huge value adds when it comes to owning a property big enough to in turn house those different types of requirements, right, or needs or wants. But in actuality, the ownership of real estate is not necessarily as beneficial as it sounds, and this is one of many reasons why. I'll show you this. If you're looking at real estate as kind of your primary retirement fund, you may want to think again. So this kind of summarizes: if you had bought $1 million home, let's say in San Francisco in 2010, it's worth about $2 million today. If you bought the same amount or put the same amount of money into the S&P 500, it's worth roughly $7 million, right? And so past performance is no guarantee of future results. And so that's my financial advisory background, just coming in and giving you the disclaimer that you need to hear. But the S&P 500 typically outpaces the US housing market year over year. And this is a great graphic of you being able to kind of visualize that and kind of come to that conclusion. So don't necessarily look at your house as the best method of investing for the long run. So getting an opportunity to listen to John and his strategy and how he approaches properties in 2025 is extremely helpful for me as a developer who wants to develop bigger, right? I want to go after projects that John is doing in his sleep. And so being able to learn from him with his approach is always helpful. So shout out to CNBC for interviewing John, and I was able to learn a lot. Hopefully you were able to as well. And I appreciate you listening to me ramble. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment below, and I'll see you in the next video.